I remember when Street Fighter 2 was starting to get a little bit old, right around the time that Super Street Fighter 2 came out. People started really asking the question, you know, it's like, can Capcom even count to 3? Like, what's Street Fighter 3 gonna be all about? And there were rumors about that for a while, and then they just kind of died off. You know, Capcom went and made Street Fighter Alpha and did a bunch of other stuff, and then finally Street Fighter 3 came out, and didn't really burn up as a mainstream sensation quite like Street Fighter 2 did, but you know, the fighting faithful found it and really enjoyed it. And then that was kind of it. I don't really think anyone expected there to even be a Street Fighter 4, you know, just because of all the different versus games, just all the different 2D stuff that Capcom had gotten into. So it was shocking to me when I first saw that there was going to be a Street Fighter 4, and then B, what it was going to look like. You know, here they were taking the core Street Fighter series into polygonal territory, and it seemed crazy at the time, but luckily for all of us, it's worked out really well, and the resulting game is really quite amazing. Fight! Despite Street Fighter 4 being a polygonal game, I think that people that you know, understand what Street Fighter 2 was and like that game will be able to jump right in without too much trouble. But that's not to say that Street Fighter 4 is a total throwback and, you know, is just going to rely on all of these kind of classic characters and classic situations to get by. There's a lot of depth to Street Fighter 4 and a lot of different things going on in the fighting system that people might not initially expect.
Violence is a beautiful thing!
Probably the biggest addition to Street Fighter 4 is the focus system, and this is done by you can either kind of tap or hold down the middle 2 attack buttons, and this initiates kind of a charge up followed by an attack if you hold it down long enough, and that's an unblockable attack. And this can be used in a lot of different ways. If you kind of just hit it when someone's punching you, or if a fireball is headed your way, it'll actually parry that attack and you won't take the damage. You know, if they're close enough, you can still let off of the buttons and follow through with your charged up attack for kind of a reversal situation. You know, this is only really the most basic level of using the focus attack. You can cancel your special moves into a focus attack. There's all kinds of upper level, kind of higher tier stuff that people are going to get into that make this a really versatile and interesting way to kind of change up the game without totally reinventing it and alienating all of the people that understand what Street Fighter is supposed to be. From there, you kind of have the standard repertoire of special attacks, you know, super attacks, and ultra attacks. The ultra meter is separate from your regular meter, and it fills up as you take damage. So now you have 1 meter and 1 special move that you can do as the meter that you get for, you know, doing damage fills up, and then another that fills up as you take damage. By kind of offsetting these, it really kind of gives you something to work for. You know, you're always kind of watching those meters, going like, oh, this is just about full, and you know, you're always watching your opponent's meter, because if you see that their ultra meter is full, you're going to have to respect that and hopefully stay away from one of the game's most devastating attacks, the ultra attack. Those are a lot of fun to see, especially in 3D, because the camera does kind of pan aside for the ultras, and you kind of get them from a different angle, and you see some really wild stuff there. So let's talk about the roster. The 12 characters from Street Fighter 2 that return haven't really changed a whole lot. You know, they haven't gone in and totally broken Ryu and rebuilt him from the ground up or anything like that. A lot of these characters play roughly the same way that they were seen in Super Turbo. But the roster feels pretty well rounded with characters from different aspects of the Street Fighter universe. Sakura's in there, Dan is in there, complete with Super Taunt.
What's the problem? Don't underestimate me.
So automatically this game is 5 stars. Rose is in there, Gen from the Alpha games is in there. I think Gen is probably my least favorite character in the entire game, but hey, maybe you love him, I don't know. Of course, you can unlock Akuma, because you know, at this point it wouldn't be a modern Street Fighter game without Akuma, but you can also get Akuma's brother, kind of the yang to Akuma's yin, Gouken, and he is the guy that is Ryu and Ken's teacher or something, and he is a powerful character that has some really interesting but very different takes on the kind of standard Ryu and Ken gameplay. And that's one of the things with Street Fighter 4 that really kind of separates it from the previous games and gives it, in some spots, kind of an SNK-like feel. You'll find that different strengths of attacks will have different impacts and different effects. They're most notably seen in the 4 brand new characters that were created for Street Fighter 4. Using these different strengths actually makes them a little bit more complicated than your typical Street Fighter characters. And I think some people are either going to really embrace that or really kind of be rebuffed by that and not really be into the new characters at all. And these guys don't always fit in quite as well as some of those other guys do, though, you know, they do have some pretty crushing damage potential if you really get good at these fighters. So obviously this is a fighting game. You're going to be able to do basically all of the things you would expect out of a modern fighting game. There's an arcade mode, and here you'll find a story. There's some anime cutscenes thrown in that kind of describe little bits and pieces of the characters' backstories, and those are okay. Some are better than others. You'll have a versus mode, so locally you and a friend can just pick up controllers and go at it. You can fight online, which is obviously a big part of any modern fighting game, and you know, in our tests the online seemed to work just fine. But the online mode seems pretty typical in terms of it being, you know, ranked matches, unranked matches, and you know, finding one other player and fighting against them for rank points or just for fun. But what the game does have is something that's sort of like a Virtua Fighter 5 had, where you can kind of set titles and icons for yourself. And as you play online or as you play through some of the other modes, you'll unlock different titles. Some of them are directly related to characters as you kind of go through training with characters. Like Sagat has one where the title is just "Password is Tiger," which is pretty good. And then, you know, all sorts of different stuff that you can use to kind of just denote what type of player you are, and little icons like a little baby chick with a headband, or, you know, like an eye that signifies that it sees things like an eye would. I don't know. There are tons of titles and tons of icons to unlock. The game doesn't really tell you what you need to do to unlock any of them either, so that seems like it'll be a struggle for someone who really wants to get all of that stuff. Then there's also a set of challenge modes. You'll find the typical kind of training mode that you would find in any fighting game, where you can just kind of fight against a dummy. But there's also a more involved training mode where the game will present you with moves and ask you to do them. This is really good because it kind of shows you the unique bits of every little character. It starts out pretty basic. It actually does get really tough in terms of just like laying these fairly heavy combos on you, you know, 5-6 parts at a time, and you know, those can get really challenging. So this mode is a cool idea, and I think it'll go a long way to kind of showing people what the potential is for all these different combos and how you can kind of work in the focus attacks and do some of this different stuff. And if you complete them, you will be a better player. But the game doesn't teach any kind of theory and doesn't really give you any kind of context as to when you'd want to use one move or one combo as opposed to another. So it's not quite going to take someone from absolute beginner, never played a fighting game status and turn them into a pro. You're still going to have to figure out, you know, what to do with this stuff once they kind of give you the tools as to how to play the game. Visually, the game's really impressive because the characters are extremely expressive. And you'll notice this when you pull off ultra attacks and when you finish people off. You know, there's just huge bulging eyes whenever you unleash an ultra. You know, as the opponent kind of sees what's coming, they'll really start freaking out, and that's really awesome to see. Everyone just looks mean, but at the same time, the game maintains kind of a goofy streak throughout. I mean, you know, some of that's because some characters are just a little bit ridiculous to begin with, but the game definitely has a sense of humor, and that really shines through in a way that doesn't really betray the serious mentality of actually playing the game. You know, the game's always kind of had some laughs in it here and there, and the stuff that's in Street Fighter 4 doesn't really feel out of place. There's probably also a few laughs to be had at the expense of the voice acting. Maybe not all intentional, but the game actually defaults to English, and so like Ryu and Ken and just like everybody is speaking English, and that sounds almost blasphemous. When I first heard about it, I was like, that's just wrong. When you beat the game, you do unlock the Japanese voices, and you actually can set it per character. So if you want one character to speak Japanese while another speaks English, you can get that. But the key thing there, the reason why this works, is because they recorded all of the special moves like recitals twice. You know, Guile saying Sonic Boom in a more English accent as opposed to a more Japanese one, or actually says Flash Kick instead of Somersault when you do the Flash Kick, depending on the language setting. And with that stuff, it actually does make it work. And with the little kind of story sequences that you'll see as you fight your rival in arcade mode, the English actually does work out a lot better than I initially anticipated, and it's pretty good.
You want the rest? Now try to bet!
So really, you know, the only thing you probably need to know about Street Fighter 4 is that it was a masterpiece in arcades that came together, I think, a lot better than anyone could have anticipated. And this home version is better than that one, both by adding new characters and new ways to play the game, you know, giving you online play to take on opponents at any time of the day and stuff like that. It's really exactly what I think people would want out of a Street Fighter sequel. It maintains the feel of the old Street Fighter games and preserves that without feeling dated or feeling like some kind of weird throwback at the same time. I think that this game is really going to appeal to a very wide audience, maybe a little wider than typically a fighting game would appeal to, just because it has this huge legacy. I think there's a lot of people out there that still remember how to throw a fireball, and if you're one of them, I think that there's a really good chance that you'll enjoy this game.
Indestructible. Indestructible.